Well, another Monday is here. This is going to be a little bit different video than what I've been doing. I have some stories to tell, and I don't have a lot of pictures this time to show you because a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about is stuff I helped people with whenever they sent me emails to my website. I don't maintain a website anymore, but what I did do whenever I maintained a website was I had a way to contact me so that if anybody had any problems that I thought I might be able to help them with, they could email me, and then I would email them back. And I got some wacky, crazy emails from people who were just trying to stir up trouble. Like, for example, these one people had some kind of a transmission problem. I can't remember what it was, and I had told them, I told them, well, you need to do this, and then they said, we've already done that. What now? And so everything I mentioned to them that they might possibly check was they just kept saying, I've already done that. What now? I mean, which obviously they were just trying to see how far they could take it, you know. And the stuff that I was telling them to do is pretty involved. And I told them finally, I says, if you're smart enough to do this stuff that you've been telling me you've already done, you don't even need my help at all. So I don't even know why we're emailing here, you know. So I stopped paying any attention to those. I had these other folks that I had talked about previously on one of my presentations, and they had a Kia that had, you know, the timing belt interval on those Kias is, if I'm not mistaken, like 108,000 miles on the one that they had, and they had just kept driving it after they were supposed to have replaced the timing belt, and whenever it died, it destroyed the engine, and they still owed something like $8,000 on the car. I don't know how people put that much mile on one that fast, but the long and the short of it was they were in a pickle because it was going to cost them a fortune to get another motor put in it. And I hate to see somebody in that kind of situation, but you know, sometimes whenever people ignore the service interval, there's not a whole lot you can do for them. We told this one girl that came to the school over there, she came to get some little something done to her Isuzu, maybe, or what it was a little SUV, and I could hear the timing belt slapping that plastic timing cover. And I said, you need to do something with this timing belt, because if you don't do something with the timing belt, it's going to pick the time whenever it gets changed out, and whenever it picks the time, then you're going to wind up in a mess. So I'm going to go ahead and order a timing belt. It'll be here tomorrow morning. It's only $40, and the school just charged 20 labor. You know, didn't charge labor. They just charged parts plus 20% plus tax. And I said, I got a guy that needs to put a timing belt on anyway. And that was an interference engine in that vehicle too. And she was goofy, and she said, oh, okay, sure, no problem. She just never showed up. And so about a month and a half later, she dropped by the shop over there, and she said, well, I was turning in at Walmart and my engine quit, and the timing belt had jumped just like you said it was going to do, and it bent all the valves, and it cost me $1,500 to get it fixed. You know, there's only so much you can do, you know what I mean? So this lady here, her name was Stacy. She emailed me, and she said, hi, my name is Stacy. I'm so glad I've come across your page that hopefully I'll get answers. Recently I got my oil changed, and the place didn't put oil in my car. The engine got seized on the driver's side, found inside the engine that a few rocker rollers were completely ruined. Okay, she made this sound like she was the one that did the work. I don't know who did the work on repairing the engine after the oil, you know, wasn't put in it, but she said basically I replaced them. It's talking about the rocker rollers. Now, did she replace them or did somebody else replace them? See, that's a lot of what I don't get from these people on these emails. Got a new battery, new spark plugs. Now the car runs again, which they didn't put oil in it. The only thing it destroyed was roller rockers. And she replaced the roller rockers and put new spark plugs and got it running again. That sounds like she left some stuff out. But anyway, the problem is it runs weird. At times it drives just perfect. At other times it's really a slow start, which means I floorboard it and it doesn't kick out of the slowness until about 25 miles per hour or so. Now this is a weird sounding thing, but I always have to kind of parse this stuff, you know. She said, then I continually have to floor it because it seems not to get enough power to keep at the speed I'm holding the accelerator. I've been told it's the fuel injectors, but I feel it has something to do with the fuel pump or maybe the fuel filter. If I stay in park and rev the engine, it drives fine until a few minutes later, and then back to the slowness. Now that's peculiar right there. I had seen Fords do that because of an oxygen sensor that basically had a loose pin fit, and it was in closed loop, but it was basically not getting a signal, and it was over fueling it, making black smoke. I mean, she didn't even tell me what the make, the model, and the year of this vehicle were. And so, I said, well, I can maybe give her a little bit of information. I said, that sounds kind of like fuel starvation. If you can get somebody to check the fuel pressure, you might find it dropping under load. But the first thing I'd do would be to replace the fuel filter. I like to blow backwards through it into a plastic container to see what comes out of it and see what that does. Well, I also said it seems peculiar that all this happened after the near meltdown of the engine. I assume it wasn't doing all that before. So if you don't have anybody that can check the fuel pressure, have the fuel filter changed by somebody you trust. See, I didn't believe she did all that other work on the vehicle herself. And I says, have them report whether or not it was clogged. If the filter's clear, the pump may be weak, but you'll surely need to check the fuel pressure to follow that path of diagnosis. Let me know what you find. So she sent me a follow-up. Thanks for the fuel filter idea. It worked. That's all I got out of her. But anyway, I don't know all the rest of the details that she left out. Sometimes people would send very detailed emails, and sometimes they would just send really sketchy information. Just like when I was working at the dealership, and one of those service writers would be in a hurry because he'd be writing a lot of work orders. And one of the work orders I hated to get the worst was the ones that said, runs rough. I just despise them kind, because sometimes you drive it and you couldn't feel anything wrong with what was doing. But you were supposed to parse what they had said and fix it where it wouldn't run rough, So anyway, and I also laughed about that one service writer that passed a work order out to my buddy, or me one, I can't remember who, it said, windshield won't separate rain from water. I don't know what that was about. Vehicle 2 was a 2001 Windstar, cabin heat issue. He said, I got a clicking sound like a vent door trying to open or close when the heater's on. To get the heater to blow warm air, I usually have to have all of the back vents on. The same with the air conditioner. It has a clicking noise. It also has a clicking noise. Is this something I can fix? And this guy's name was Robert. And I said, that clicking noise is probably related to some jammed doors in the plenum. The actuators make that noise when they try to move the door, and it won't move, or it'll have broken teeth on those little door motors, A technician would remove the actuators and try to move the doors by hand. If they move freely, the actuators would be replaced. If not, the plenum has to come out with the repairs. Now, what I would usually do is I would take an old actuator, like I usually had some of those levers on hand, and I would stick that into that door and see if I could move the door easily. Now, sometimes people would drop a pencil or have a pencil or some Tinker Toys or something like that would go down the defrost and would go down there and get fouled with the doors and all that hogwash, and you'd have to take the plenum off and pull it apart and get that nonsense out of there. Sometimes you could pull the blower motor off and you might be able to fish that stuff out of there. But anyway, I said the plenum might have to come out for repairs, if there's stuff in there, or if the door is broke. And he said, you were right on with your diagnosis. The repair is done and the heater is working. He didn't give me any details on his follow-up either, but there it is. At least he gave me a follow-up. A lot of them, they'd ask me questions. I'd send them information back. They'd never say anything else. This is vehicle number 3. This is a late 90s GMC Suburban that the transmission wouldn't shift. She said, I'm having a problem with my late 90s model GMC Suburban automatic transmission. I had the oil change 2 days ago. The day before this, I began having the problem. When I was driving the vehicle, it started just fine, but then instead of changing gears, it stays in first gear and the RPMs just increase. The speed gradually increases, but you can tell it's still first gear. I've checked all the fluids and everything's fine. It was low on coolant, so I added some of that. Any ideas before I take it somewhere? Well, I told him, I said, the PCM either doesn't know the vehicle is moving, or there's something stuck or inoperative in the shift circuits. I guess the speedometer works. That was a question I was asking him. have somebody retrieve the trouble codes and remove the battery cable for about 10 minutes, put it back on, that reboots everything, see if that makes a difference. Let me know what happens. Now, one of the reasons I told him to remove the battery cable and let it reboot, a lot of the times I would remove both battery cables and touch them together to go ahead and empty the juice out of the capacitors and the PCM and whatnot. But it's really surprising how that kind of reset will sometimes fix all the problems somebody has. And when I'm giving somebody advice like that, I just told him to pull the cables off for a while. Whenever I'm telling them to do something like that, I'm thinking about some TSBs and stuff. There was one TSB on some of these GMC Suburbans and Chevys and all, where they were telling you to pull a particular fuse, and that was going to reboot everything, and it would bring everything back online. I didn't really know if that was going to help him or not, but I did know that if it didn't help him, it didn't matter because it didn't cost anything. That's always, I'm looking for cheap and easy. When I give somebody a piece of advice, I'll say, well, how much is it going to cost you if this doesn't fix this? Now, I'm not telling him to do anything that's going to damage the vehicle. But his follow-up was, thanks for your help. Your advice was right on point. I really appreciate it. I guess unhooking the battery cable must have done it. That's all the information I got back from him, too. This other guy here, I managed to help him, and I kind of had seen this before on these vehicles, and I was able to give him some really solid advice. I have a 98 Nissan Frontier 5-speed 2.4. This was a 98 Nissan Frontier. And when I'm either in gear or not, my engine will sputter when the gas pedal is lightly pressed. In other words, it didn't matter if it was under load or not. You give it a little bit of gas, it would sputter, start skipping. Once driving up to speed with the gas pedal at least halfway down, things seem fine. I've replaced the wires, plugs, distributor cap. I have a K&N air filter that was cleaned out about a year ago, and my fuel filter was changed less than 3 years ago. Well, that's a pretty good bit of time a year ago on the air filter cleaning, which I've never been a tremendous fan of K&N stuff because it's kind of pricey. I'll just buy one of the regular air filters. Anyway, and my fuel filter was changed less than 3 years ago. Ford had modified their fuel filter changes on their pickups one time to down to 15,000 miles, But anyway, I don't know what it was supposed to have been on this 98 Nissan. But he said the problem started with a check engine light and the code saying cylinder number 4 misfire. That's when I changed the wires, the plugs, etc., and I'm still having the same sputter. So he did all of that. Nothing changed. Of course, I will tell you that the sputter is not likely to be because of the air filter or the fuel filter. So, especially because he's sitting there and his engine's unloaded and he gasses it a little bit and it starts dropping a cylinder. And I told him, I says, there's 4 little ports that feed exhaust gas to the cylinders on those trucks. I imagine port number 4 is the only one that's getting EGR, thus you're going to have a misfire there when the EGR valve opens because it's dumping all the exhaust gas recirculation into that one cylinder because the other 3 ports are clogged. And they're right there at the mouth of the, where the air goes in. Because the EGR system is set up so that it's supposed to give every single one of them the same amount of EGR. I says, now, disconnect the vacuum hose, go into the EGR valve, and drive the truck that way. If the sputter goes away, then the EGR ports need to be cleaned. If not, we need to move in a different direction. His follow-up said, wow, not only does it not sputter anymore, but it seems like it picked up about 10 horsepower. I'm kind of strapped for cash at the moment, so how long do I have till I can pay somebody to clean those ports out? Anyway, he could have cleaned the ports out himself. It's not that difficult to do. But the Ford Windstar 3.8s and some of the others had 3.8 Ford engines in them, they had this same setup. And some of the 4.2s. Now they would have all of the EGRs and I discovered that first on a Windstar I was working on. And it had one port that was receiving all the EGR to that cylinder. It would start dropping that cylinder when the EGR opened, and then it would turn off the injector because of the misfire on that cylinder. And that really confused me. And that was on a 95 model. All right, so I got a 2003. This is a 2003 Explorer, vehicle number 5. I've got a 2003 Ford Explorer with about 96,000 miles on it. The other day I put it in reverse and backed up about 120 feet. And when I got up to about 20 miles an hour in reverse, it started bucking. I then drove to a parking lot and tried the same routine and kept getting the same results. Any idea what may be the problem? I would really appreciate it. Thanks. All right, now I had seen this on a vehicle that I owned, which was an 85 Explorer. Some of you guys might remember that Audi had an issue way back in the late 90s, I think, whenever it was. Maybe it was mid 90s, where what happened was somebody would crank one of those Audi 5000s up, and it would, whenever they put it in gear, it would take off backwards and it would run into something. And they tried to blame it on the car, but an independent insurance inquiry discovered that that was due to driver error. They were putting their foot on the gas, and whenever they put their foot on the gas and they put it in reverse, it would take off backwards because they're on fast idle. And when it took off backwards, it would throw the driver forward, and it would continue to feed itself until it got to going fast enough until it hit something. That wasn't the car's fault. That was driver error. In response to that, and I don't know if any of the other automakers had programs to take care of this, we had a recall on the Jeep Cherokees, which had the same configuration of pedals and all, and they didn't have a brake pedal you were supposed to mash to put it in gear. They made us replace that shift cable, that shift interlock cable, and it had a solenoid in it we had to wire up so that you would have to put your foot on the brake pedal before you could take it out of park. Now, anyway, but my Taurus, I had made missed a exit on an interstate one time. Me and the boys were driving along. I got over on the shoulder where there wasn't no traffic, and there wasn't any traffic coming in anyway. And I backed up about, like he did, about 120 feet so I could get on that exit. And while I was backing up, it felt like the fuel was shutting off, and it, like a stopped up fuel filter or something. But when I put it in drive, everything was fine. And I kind of figured that out because at the dealership, I figured, well, if I don't feel anything else wrong, I could duplicate it every time I put it in reverse. This friend of mine had a Taurus, the same year model his wife did, and it was doing that. And he was working on transmission at the time, and the car was still under warranty. And he took that transmission out and tore it all to pieces and put it back together, without realizing that was a strategy that Ford did to keep it from getting out of control if you were backing up too fast. Now that's not on every Ford, because the diesel instructor over at the college had a 98 Taurus, and I says, let's see if your Taurus does what my 95 Taurus does. So we got out in a big open parking lot there at the college when no cars were parked out there. It was early in the morning, and I put that thing, I bet I could have gone 100 miles an hour in reverse, and that thing never did cut off like that. So you don't ever know if it's going to do that or not. But I said, not all Fords have this strategy. I told him about my 95 Taurus. I told him the story I just told you. And if it throws you against the accelerator when you're driving too fast, you might crash in reverse, and they were trying to prevent that. Now, obviously, that wasn't something they were required to do. Somebody typed an algorithm that would do that. And I said, but anyway, he said, that's weird, thanks. You just took a huge weight of worry off my shoulders. I thought I was about to have to spend a huge amount of cash on a transmission due to the fact my extended warranty just expired. Thanks again for your good words. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. That felt pretty good to help that guy out and take, and you might remember me talking that one time about that guy that had this, I was working on a 92 F-150. Now a 92 F-150, and those 90s F-150s, they had what they call a lean cruise mode on the, and what happens with you're cruising down the highway, I guess to try to help with the fuel economy, the engine would drop into the leanest mode where it could run, and if you happen to be looking at the data PIDs, you would actually see the oxygen sensor playing out and go really, really, really lean. And that wasn't anything that was going to help a lot on the emissions. They were basically doing it just for fuel economy. And those cars would get those pickups would get 19 or 20 miles to the gallon. if you drove them like you were afraid you're going to tear them up. I had tested gas mileage on some of them with a tool that we had and found that's what they were capable of getting. Anyway, that thing, whenever you would come over a hill, about the time it was coming out of lean cruise mode to make sure everything was okay, if you were coming over a hill and you were feathering off of the gas a little bit, that thing would feel like somebody ran into the back of the truck. I mean, it would go boom, and it would just scare the daylights out of you. And so I did. I put the data collector. It was basically the portable vehicle analyzer, they called it. It was part of the SBDS machine that actually plugged in between the PCM and the wire harness, and it was there to record anything and everything, right? Okay, so you could tell it what you wanted it to record before you put it on there, and that's what I did. And when I recorded it doing that, and I uploaded that file to Ford via dial-up, it took forever to do, because that was back in the early 90s. Ford called me back, and I said, and that guy says, "You'll never fix that. There's a lot of those trucks that are doing that, but if you're not driving them in such a way that you make them do it, then we don't have any reason to release anything to fix that." And so that was for OBD1 stuff too, so you'd have to put another engine controller on those, and they didn't want to fool with that if there weren't enough people complaining about it. I hung up the phone, and this guy that was standing close by hearing my conversation, because I was in the write-up area whenever they called me to the phone when the Ford hotline called me back. And that guy says, "My truck does that, and I thought something was wrong with the transmission, but now that I've listened to you talk to that guy, I'm just not going to worry about it." Anyway, this guy says, this is vehicle number 6. This guy says, "I just bought a 98 Acura CL30 3.0 with an automatic transmission, and it runs smooth and strong. It has directional tires, but the two in the front are different than the two in the rear. When I accelerate or decelerate, I hear a humming noise that sounds just like the tires. Since it's an automatic transmission, I put it in neutral the next time I slowed to a stop to see if the noise might be the transmission, but the noise is still there. Could be two different sets of direction. Could two different sets of directional tires make this noise? I checked the transmission fluid, and it's perfect and pink. The car shifts smooth. It's just annoying a noise between 25 and 30 miles an hour, and then it fades away." Well, I says, try switching the engine off with the transmission in neutral with the noise present, and you'll get an additional piece of data that way. Your email indicates you may have replaced the tires but still have the noise. I really couldn't tell. It wasn't plain to me whether you had done that or not. When you swerve gently from one side to another, check to see if the noise comes and goes with the swerving. That's another useful piece of information. If it's not too objectionable, I wouldn't worry a whole lot about it. Just pay attention. If it started getting worse, it's probably the tires. Now, I had also seen a Honda car that belonged to a lady at the college, and it was either a Honda or a Toyota Camry, I can't remember, but she had driven her Camry for a very long time with the same tires on the rear without having the tires rotated, and they developed a little bit of this cross ripple wear pattern that you see when the toe is slightly out on the rear. After she rotated them and those tires were on the front and her front tires were on the rear, the same thing, like tractor tires going down the road, drove her crazy. And so whenever we got into the shop and I saw what had happened, I just rotated the tires front to rear. They just rotated them, front to rear. I rotated them front to rear and put the back ones on the back again and the front ones back on the front, because they all had about the same amount of tread on them anyway. And her noise was gone. All right, so he said his follow-up on this 1998 Acura humming noise. He said, "Excellent advice. I did several things as you recommended. I put transmission in neutral, turned it off. Definitely the same noise what I heard all the way to a dead stop, like being in a truck with this tire noise. I also drove the car and swerved left and right and heard the noise change sound." He said, "Finally, I changed the rear tires to the front and the fronts to the rear, and the noise is now heard at higher speeds as opposed to before when I heard it around 25 to 30, so it's definitely the tires." So I was able to help that guy and all. Of course, like I say, sometimes people would email you with stuff with not enough information, or, it was stuff that there's no way they didn't have enough data that you could make any information. But this next girl, Vehicle 7 was a 2002 Rodeo with an electrical problem. She said when the lights are on and the brake pedal's pushed, all the rear lights except the top middle brake light goes out. Well, that's not too hard to figure out, is it? When the lights are on, running lights and or full headlights, cruise control won't work. The cruise button on the dash lights up, but you can't set the speed. When the cruise is on, all brake lights except the top middle light won't work sometimes. This is interesting too. When the vehicle is off, the driver's side door is open and the brake pedal is pressed. Constant high-pitched sound happens, the same sound as the warning given when the car is off, the door is open, and the lights are on. Now this is starting to thicken the plot, isn't it? No problems that I'm aware of with wipers, headlights, internal lights, or turn signal. This girl had given me a lot of information, a lot of detailed information. She'd been gathering info on this thing and paying really close attention to it. Thought it was pretty impressive how much information she had for me. She said someone said it could be the turn signal multifunction switch in the steering column. Does that seem like it could be the cause, or is it more likely to be a short circuit or something else? Please help. I can't drive at night and my job depends on it. And she signed it Sunshine. I don't know if that was her name or her handle. Well, I said, sound like a problem with the bulb sockets or the bulbs. I start by replacing both rear bulbs because that's cheap and a ground problem can happen right there at the bulb. Now those bulbs can look good and be bad, the 3357 and similar varieties. Examine the bulb sockets for corrosion or heat damage. It would seem odd that both sides would have the same problem, but they could have died one at the time. And she said, and then I went on to tell her the reason that the cruise control would react to this concern is that the cruise control searches for a ground through the stop lamp bulbs, and when that ground is neutralized for some reason, bad bulbs, bad bulb connection, bad bulb ground, the cruise will react as if the brake pedal is being activated and it will kill the cruise. So the brake lights may be getting their ground through the tail lamp filament or vice versa, which would explain why those lights go off when you apply the brake. Let's replace the bulbs and examine the sockets first. That'll be the cheapest thing to do, and let me know what happens. And she said, you're fabulous. I replaced both rear brake bulbs and everything works just like it's supposed to. Thank you so much, Sunshine. Okay, Sunshine's in good shape now. Here's one. Pulled the transmission out of my 96 Dodge Dakota and had it rebuilt at a local shop. After reinstalling it, the engine wouldn't start. There's no spark. The truck ran fine prior to the transmission work. I've made sure all the electrical connectors are intact and attached to the transmission. Nothing was done other than disconnecting the battery. And so I said, check the crank sensor wires. Maybe you pinched them or left them unplugged. And he goes, I pulled the crank sensor out last night and it had picked up a star washer on its magnet without me doing it. So he pulled the star washer off. He said, and he put it back in. It started right up. And this vehicle 9 says, my vehicle will not stay started unless I press the gas. It will stay running as long as I keep pressing the gas. What's the problem? Well, anybody that's worked on very many Fords that have idle air control valves are going to know what to tell her about this. I said, I'd say the idle air control valve is stuck. Make sure there are no vacuum leaks and have somebody clean the throttle body and replace the idle air control valve. Pull the battery terminal off first so everything can start relearning. It's not that tough to replace that part for somebody that's got some wrench smarts about them. And I said, let me know what happens. Well, her follow-up was, you're exactly right. Thanks so much. Well, I wanted to tell you another little story that I thought was kind of humorous. I got a little over a minute left. I stopped out there where I saw these two women by the road on this Cadillac. It was cold weather, and I saw that they were pulled over with a flat. I was on the way home from work wearing my uniform. And I parked my Explorer, and I got out, and they were, saying, well, we got a flat tire here. So I dug the spare out and started putting it on there. And this wrecker pulled up when I was about 5 minutes into the job. And he says, well, I wish I'd have got here earlier, because they had called AAA and I didn't know it. But since I was wearing a uniform, they thought I was AAA. So I went ahead and changed the tire and had a little conversation with the guy, because the tire was the same size as the original tire, so I didn't need to worry about the differential gears and all that. And anyway, when I got through tightening everything up, I was closing the hatch on my Explorer, and they says, well, do I need to sign a paper or anything? I said, no, I'm just on my way home from work. And I cheated that record driver out of a AAA job, had no clue. Anyway, I hope you guys had fun with this, and I'll talk to you next time.